Pop star turned politician Bobi Wine returns to Uganda after traveling to the U.S. for medical care. With sub-Saharan growth continuing to rise, could an African Union initiative for advanced training and research in science and technology help the continent's economies flourish? And how to address the worldwide mental health crisis among refugees? We'll explain. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. Ugandan opposition politician Robert Kyagulanyi is back in his homeland on Thursday, but hours after landing at Entebbe International Airport, there were conflicting reports on his whereabouts. Kyagulanyi, popularly known as reggae musician Bobi Wine, was taken away by police as he got off a plane, but a police official denied that he was under arrest and says Wine was being escorted to his home in Kampala. However, a short time later, the official, who was not authorized to speak on record, told Reuters that Wine was taken to a police station in his neighborhood. Now, within the last few minutes, we've learned that Wine is at home, where he gave up an impromptu news conference to a house packed with journalists and supporters. Several hundreds of supporters of Wine gathered outside the police station where they believed he was being held. Wine, 36, a prominent challenger to President Yoweri Museveni, was returning from the United States where he received treatment for injuries he says were sustained during torture by government security forces while he was detained. Ugandan authorities have denied any mistreatment of Wine while he was in their custody. Wine has attracted a large youth following through songs critical of Museveni and his government.
So happy because the man is struggling for us, the man is fighting for us. We like youth, we have never benefited anything through this government. So I think that me myself that I'm so happy, and even the others who are so happy more than me. I'm happy to welcome our president because we are tired of this fake government like this. We youth have never benefited anything from those governments.
Wine's message that the youth of Uganda need someone fresh to lead the nation and tackle the many problems that they face appears to be resonating with the under-30 population. Wine says the youth are tired of government corruption, unemployment and repressive state of dissent. Now, a short time ago, I spoke by phone with the deputy spokesman of Uganda's government, Colonel Shaban Bantariza, about what really transpired on Bobi Wine's arrival and why the media was prevented from covering his return.
Bobi Wine is an honorable member of parliament here. He has committed no offense. And so when he got here, he was received. And he's right now at his home in one of our districts surrounding Kampala, Wakiso.
People have been concerned about his security and safety once he gets back home because obviously he has claimed that the government of Uganda arrested him, tortured him, and in a way put his life in danger. Should anybody worry about his life, his security in the coming days?
Absolutely none, because those claims that he was arrested and tortured and so on arose out of an incident in which he was not alone. There were about 4 other MPs who were arrested with him. They were taken to court. They were charged. They were given bail. So emphasizing Bobi Wine as if the others were exonerated or were set free, and then the government is targeting Bobi Wine is part and parcel of the false propaganda from local elements here together with some foreign elements.
Colonel Bantariza, you mentioned there are 30 others, but there is a reason why, obviously, Bobi Wine is the one we are talking about. It's either the government of the action that has elevated him to those status, or he has been treated in a somewhat different way. And some people say the government seems to be terrified of Bobi Wine.
On the contrary, it's not the government of Uganda that gave you a platform at VOA, a platform at BBC, a platform at Al Jazeera. It's not the government of Uganda. It's you, actually, the media, that has been disproportionately propping him up for reasons and intentions best known to you.
Are you saying that we cannot expect to see him again being treated in a somewhat different way than the other members of parliament in Uganda?
He was never treated in any different way because he was charged with the other 33 in the same courts. He was given bail with the others on the same day. He said he wanted to go to the United States for treatment. Nobody stopped him. He went. He has come back. So nothing is abnormal about his going. He's coming back. He's being an honorable member of parliament or facing charges that everybody else faces, because any one of us is a candidate for charge for any offense in the court of law. Is
Bobi Wine a big challenge to the government of President Yoweri Museveni?
How would he be when he doesn't even have because Uganda is a multi-party democracy with a multiplicity of parties, and they are the ones that contest for political power against the ruling party. How would he be the biggest challenge when he doesn't even have a registered political party?
If Bobi Wine is just an ordinary member of parliament, is not a threat, why was the media prevented from covering his return home today? And some were actually roughed up and some manhandled and kicked out of the venue.
We don't want him to be engaged with people he could not control, and we agreed with him on those guidelines, and he obliged without any hitch. So there were no pictures to be taken of Bobi Wine addressing people or addressing whatever at the airport lounge. So the pictures were not there. The story was not there. The story now can be anybody who wants to go and address and talk to Bobi Wine at his home, and if Bobi Wine calls a press conference at his home right now, he will, no trouble at all. So the story actually is not at Entebbe, but it is at his home where he is now.
Well, that was Colonel Shaban Bantariza, deputy spokesman of the Ugandan government. Down south, Zimbabwean President Emerson Mnangagwa on Wednesday made sweeping changes to the country's top civil service ranks, retiring a batch of long-serving bureaucrats and promoting new faces in a break with his predecessor, Robert Mugabe. Mnangagwa, elected in July in a vote ratified by the courts after an opposition challenge, is under pressure at home and abroad to differentiate his administration from that of his former mentor, Mugabe, who was ousted in a bloodless coup last November. Mishek Zibanda, chief secretary to the president, says Mnangagwa retired 9 senior government officials, some who had served since independence in 1980. He also reassigned 19 other top civil servants without giving them specific roles. The 76-year-old president appointed 17 other permanent secretaries, the civil servants in charge of running the daily affairs of government ministries. Human resources development has been identified as the single most important strategic capital for the African continent. Organizations like the African Capacity Building Foundation, the African Union's Specialized Agency for Capacity Development, have set up formidable goals to achieve through advanced training and research in science and technology. VOA's Paul Ndiho has more.
A World Bank survey says sub-Saharan Africa's growth is projected to reach 3.1% in 2018 and to average 3.6% in 2019 and 2020. This moderate growth upswing nonetheless remains uneven, with considerable variations across countries. But could investment in human resources be the answer? The African University of Science and Technology, Nelson Mandela Research Institute for Excellence on Science and Technology in Africa is leading the way, with a special focus on right areas, according to a top official at the African Capacity Building Foundation.
Science, technology, engineering, mathematics are the areas where Africa has to pay attention in terms of building skills, whether it's to promote agricultural development or to really add value to natural resources, or to be able to really propel the kind of manufacturing jobs that are needed to create a massive number of jobs for young people in the continent.
Created in 2007, the Africa University of Science and Technology is grooming Africa's top young scientists and engineers to make impact in their respective fields.
AUSD is one of those very few institutions that have been created in Africa over the last 20 years to address one of the major challenges for development in Africa, which is the inadequacy of skills in science, engineering, and technology.
The Africa Capacity Foundation supports a number of students at master's and PhD levels. Joy Oyoliwala studied for her master's in computer science, and she's one of the beneficiaries of the program.
I benefited from an ACBF scholarship to study for an MSc in computer science at the African University of Science and Technology. In my spare time, I volunteer in STEM programs, STEM being science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. This is a scheme that's been designed to empower the girl children in learning sciences.
Musibwa Francis, a PhD student, has also benefited from the funding.
I came into AST as an indigent student. I, of course, couldn't have afforded the tuition fee, nor the cost of schooling in a prestigious institution like this. I've always loved to be an academic with active involvement in research and knowledge transfer, as well as mentoring young Africans. So the funding has been a pivotal point, a turning point for my advancement as a person and as an African who is passionate about education.
Since inception, more than 38 PhD students and 26 young women have completed master's degrees in science and technology, and they are now offering smart solutions to African problems as part of a human resource development program. Analysts say Africa needs improved governance to succeed with its ambition for transformation, but it can only do this by narrowing the huge skills deficit it has in areas such as engineering, agricultural research, and the number of scientists needed to tackle Africa's infrastructure problems. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
A Hungarian appeals court is making its final verdict Thursday in the case of a man convicted of terrorism for throwing stones at police and trying to enter the country illegally at the height of the migrant crisis in 2015. Amnesty International says his actions can in no way be interpreted as terrorism and says the case is the first big test since the European Parliament voted last week to sanction Hungary over its record on fundamental rights. Henry Ridgewell reports from London.
In the summer of 2015, hundreds of thousands of migrants and refugees made their way from Turkey to Greece through the Balkan states, trying to reach Western Europe. Among them were the elderly parents and family of the defendant, named as Ahmed H., who were fleeing the war in Syria. Ahmed travelled from his home in Cyprus to help them. Their journey was halted at the Hungarian-Serbian border as authorities closed the crossing. VOA filmed these scenes around the same time. Ahmed took part in protests that erupted at the border.
He threw a few stones and he urged the police to let the refugees and migrants who had amassed there cross through to Hungary.
Ahmed was arrested by Hungarian police and in 2016 he was convicted on charges of terrorism and sentenced to 10 years in jail. This was the judge's summary.
The defendant himself shook the fence and fiddled with the lock and threw solid objects towards the policeman line on 3 occasions.
Following an appeal, Ahmed was again convicted of terrorism in a retrial. His wife and 2 daughters are in Cyprus. Amnesty says Ahmed's case is symptomatic of Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban's vilification of migrants.
The Orban government have tried to justify their refusal of asylum seekers and their ill treatment of refugees by arguing that refugees and terrorism are in some way associated. Having found no evidence for this assertion, they've really used the Ahmed case to back up their claims.
The European Parliament last week voted to enact sanctions against Hungary for flouting EU rules on fundamental rights. Prime Minister Orban said he is legitimately defending Europe's external borders.
Hungary is going to be condemned because the Hungarian people have decided that this country is not going to be a country of migrants.
Amnesty projected a protest animation Tuesday onto the front of the Ministry of Justice and has collected 100,000 signatures for a petition demanding Ahmed's release.
What we're hoping for on Thursday is that Hungary will see the trial of Ahmed as an opportunity to show to the international community and others that it is coming back on a path of the rule of law and of human rights.
That battle over Hungary's future path played out Tuesday on the streets of Budapest as thousands of anti-government protesters demanded new elections. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
Well, I want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory. Now, still ahead on Africa 54, the mental health crisis among refugees. But first, a look at Thursday's headlines.
The level of rampage corruption is affecting our country.
Sekedi Chilombo Felix.
Well, it's time for our health report, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Madu with a look at the mental health of refugees. Lino.
The United Nations High Commission of Refugees says by the end of 2017, 68.5 million individuals were forcibly displaced worldwide as a result of persecution, conflict, violence, or human rights violations. That's an increase of 2.9 million people over the previous year. 40 million people were internally displaced worldwide, and over 3 million people are asylum seekers. To date, 1 in every 110 is either an asylum seeker, internally displaced, or a refugee in the world. Health experts say many refugees have experienced difficult circumstances before, during, and after they flee that would leave them with some form of mental health challenges, such as depression or post-traumatic stress disorders. Joining us live via Skype from Amman, Jordan, is Dr. Akihiro Sita, Director of the Health Department for the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East, UNRWA, and the WHO Special Representative at UNRWA. Dr. Sita, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Would you share with us some of the common health challenges refugees are confronted with, regardless of where they are from in the world?
The biggest challenge refugees face is actually the life itself. That's the biggest life challenge and the health challenge. Mm-hmm. Of course, we have infectious diseases, maternal health, but life itself is a challenge. And in the 21st century, chronic life-related non-communicable diseases are the main challenges, including the mental health. And the mental health is one of the leading causes of suffering among refugees, and it is very important for us to address.
So when we look at mental health specifically, some people may display some signs of trauma from their experience, others may not. So what are some of the greatest challenges in first identifying, then addressing mental health problems among refugees?
Yes, we all know that the mental health is a problem. Mm-hmm. If you see the life they are living through, like what you said, mental health is the issue. The challenge number one is that our health services side. Many people are not well trained to diagnose and properly care the people with the mental health. The other side is the community side. Mental health is unfortunately still stigmatized and is very culturally sensitive. And it may not always appear even if they come to the health centers.
So, speak to us about gender-related mental health differences among refugees. What are they and how do you address them?
Yes, gender is a very important issue. Let me translate this into the vulnerability, or in common word, that is weak. Weakest always suffer. And the gender, women, children are always a weak society, a weak segment of the society, and they are very vulnerable, and they're vulnerable to mental health. The best way to address such care, is of course possible, is provide mental health care within the ordinary setting, not the special, but the inclusive. The Palestine Refugee Agency I work, we provide a WHO mental health strategy called MH-GAP in a health center setting. So if the women comes to the maternal child health care, or girl comes for the common cold care, we provide not only the specific care, but also mental health consultation. And once we diagnose depression, we provide the care. That's the best way to go.
Mm-hmm. Now, there are some refugee camps where there are more services available as opposed to others. For example, the Dadaab camp in Kenya, which is the largest camp, has a lot of the refugees have very little access to primary care. So when we look at, when we address the health of refugees in general, what are the short-term and long-term priorities?
The short-term is, of course, save the life, because they need food, shelter, water, etc. And also the acute illnesses like malaria, tuberculosis, or the infectious diseases. So like providing the care with the needed medicines and diagnostic tools. And the long-term care is that address the chronic issues like mental health, in diabetes or high blood pressure. What is important to make sure that the continuity of care, continuity of services, that is the most important long-term priorities.
Okay, Dr. Sita, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
And that was Dr. Akihiro Sita. He's director of the Health Department for the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East. Now, while flu outbreaks, Ebola and HIV typically generate the biggest headlines, scientists say tuberculosis remains the #1 infectious disease killer worldwide, affecting about 25% of the world's population. The UN General Assembly hopes to draw more attention to the problem by hosting its first ever high-level meeting on tuberculosis. The meeting will be held at the end of September to bolster global efforts to end the disease and help those affected. VOA's Jill Craig has more.
Life has not been easy for 54-year-old Stella Malhaus. The South African woman takes 9 pills a day, down from the 27 she used to take each day. But she's HIV positive, unemployed, and suffers from MDR-TB, multi-drug resistant tuberculosis. She says the stigma of disease makes her life all the more difficult.
I got my family. They can share a plate with me or a mug with me. I have to use it. I have to have my own. And then people, they won't want to come close to you because they are afraid that if you are going to talk near that person, like the wind are going to blow it in his way, that people are also going to catch it.
Tuberculosis may not garner the kind of attention of other diseases, such as HIV, malaria, or the highly publicized Ebola. But Hank Tomlinson of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says TB should not be ignored.
It's the #1 infectious disease killer. It kills more people now annually than HIV. There are about 1.7 million deaths each year from tuberculosis, and it's a threat everywhere because of the way it's spread and the ease with which it is spread.
TB is such a threat. The UN General Assembly is holding its first ever high-level meeting on the infectious disease to urge countries to pool resources together and address the epidemic. According to the CDC, about 2 billion people are infected with tuberculosis worldwide. The CDC's Rebecca Martin says preventative treatment is crucial, especially for those with the latent form of the disease.
Getting them on treatment, which is less expensive, a shorter course, and the adherence is much higher, we can stop going on to active TB, which leads to spread of more TB.
But unless patients complete their treatment, drug resistance can develop, making treatment more difficult.
These are variants of tuberculosis that are severe. They don't work with the common 4-drug treatment. They're resistant to 1 or more of those drugs, and they require a different, more challenging course of treatment for a patient.
Tuberculosis, an airborne bacterial disease, disproportionately affects the poor, those who live and work in close quarters, and those with compromised immune systems, including patients with HIV. In South Africa, MDR-TB rates are among the highest in the world.
We're not seeing the increase in cases due to people acquiring drug resistance, but that multi-drug resistant TB is being transmitted from person to person.
Scientists and stakeholders hope the high-level UN meeting will increase the global fight against TB, potentially saving millions of lives. Jill Craig, VOA News, Washington.
That's our health report for today. To stay in touch, find me on Twitter @LenorMoudou. Vincent, back to you.
Well, thank you very much, Lenore. I'll be sure to watch Lenore Moudou's health report every Tuesday and Thursday right here on Africa 54. Welcome back to Africa 54, and here's what's trending. At Johannesburg's roving Bantu kitchen, owner Sifiso Ntuli cooks up a mix of traditional food and cultural experience. Ntuli was born in Mpumalanga, South Africa, then grew up in Soweto, but traveled the rest of Africa and the world as a political exile before returning to Johannesburg at the end of apartheid. The roving Bantu kitchen is a small, peculiar community spot with live music that captures the soul of the city. Ntuli's specialties are inspired by a variety of Pan-African dishes, including tripe, sheep's head, and flatbreads. It's located in Brixton, a former bastion of white oppression during apartheid that is transforming to bridge a historical divide between races, the rich and the poor. Well, next up, a mobile church is bringing hope-on Christian services to worshippers in the remote villages of Russia's Tatarstan Republic. For many worshippers living in the remote regions of Russia's Tatarstan Republic, the Zensk church is a journey too far. That's why its priest, Father Andrei Strebkov, created this mobile version. It's a church on wheels. Father Strebkov hits the road about once a week. He says the number of worshippers waiting to attend his services is increasing, an indication his idea is a success. Father Strebkov says there is nothing new about his mobile church. It's partially inspired by the Old Testament story of how the Jews walked through the Sinai desert carrying a portable temple with them. Well, and finally, Czech IT specialists have created a new app to detect counterfeit paintings and artwork. The OneProof app has been developed by IT specialists from the Faculty of Information Technology in Brno. The app scans the surface details of original paintings to create a digital passport. Photographs of the artwork in question can then be compared with this digital passport to verify them. The creators of the app hope to develop it further so that in future it will be able to identify the style of the artist. And that's what's trending today, and that's our show. Goodbye. Good night.
Welcome to English in a Minute. Today's episode won't cost you anything.
Freebie.
Let's see what this one is about.
Anna, I love my job.
Oh yeah? Why is that?
I get so many freebies from the bands I write about. CDs, t-shirts, water bottles, even tickets to see them perform.
Wow. The only freebie I ever got from my